Kia ora koutou. I'm Sean Davis, an Enterprise Advisor at Venture Taranaki, and you're joining us for another round of Ahead of the Curve webinar, brought to you by Venture Taranaki in partnership with the Regional Business Partners Network. As we're moving through different alert levels, business owners have a responsibility in joining us, have a responsibility to meet public health requirements to ensure we move towards our goal of elimination of COVID-19. A large part of this involves ensuring physical distancing and contact tracing. With that, today we have Roger Ford, the Manager of Business Solutions at Datacom New Zealand, discuss successful ways to contact trace in your business. We also have Adam Harris joining to help facilitate the session. Over to you, Adam.
Fantastic. Kia ora. Welcome, everybody. So for those of you that haven't been before, a couple of things to just point you out. Top right-hand corner, you'll have speaker view or gallery view. Please toggle between the two of those just to see either who's speaking or all of the panelists. We also have the chat box. If you could open that and just click down to where it says all panelists and attendees. This will give you the opportunity to just type any thoughts or comments in there. And the first thing I'd like you to do is to just type in your name and where you're from. And the other thing is just to make you aware of the Q&A. If you could open the Q&A box, pop-up will appear, and as we go through the presentation, if you'd like to type in your questions so that when we get to the end of the presentation, I can ask Roger what his thoughts are on your questions. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Roger. He's going to go through his presentation, and we'll see you shortly. Roger.
Thanks very much, Adam. I am a newbie to driving these things, so just bear with me as I get up to speed. Just to kick this off, it is really important to appreciate that this is a very, very unusual situation we're all in. One of the key points I want to make in all of this is that we are trying to do two things at the same time. We are trying to do business as usual, as well as respond to the COVID-19 crisis. So there are two pressures on our business, and it's really important to keep those two things in mind. So with that, I'm actually going to kick off the presentation and then share the screen. Okay, sorry, just like all great plans, someone just decided to call me as I did that. So I'll just get rid of that. We'll share the screen. So hopefully that's all coming up. Okay, so looking at the presentation, so I just need to get my notes back on the screen here. So yeah, so we're in this really, really unusual situation. Now, the key thing too, I will really want to emphasize here is that nobody was prepared for this. Everybody's working this out for the first time. So it's really important to give yourselves a bit of a break here and not try and implement perfect systems. There is a temptation to design things when there is government law being put in place to design things that will completely satisfy it. We all have to get there as quickly as possible. Now, this situation has been no different for any business, including Datacom. One of the things that we discovered during when the lockdown was announced, we had to respond really, really quickly. Now, Datacom has a number of important roles to play. We maintain the critical systems for a lot of essential services. So part of our business as usual incorporated many of the resilient things that you need. But even then, that wasn't enough. We actually had to enhance our business as usual practices with a special response to that. I was part of the team that was at the core of putting Datacom's BCP plans together, and I also authored the plan for Auckland, which is about 1,500 people. The reason I was involved with that was because for the last 25 years, I've been working with businesses and building capability, and specifically looking at things like rescuing distressed businesses or helping them manage through crisis, whether it's earthquakes or other things. So I had some experience in this area. Even then, that did not prepare us for what we are experiencing now. So I thought a good place to start is where we're all starting, which is with a blank piece of paper. This is where everybody starts their contact tracing. And I just want to say that first of all, to be really clear that the responsibility here is, although it's for contact tracing, we're not actually going to be doing contact tracing. Our goal is to collect the information that those who are doing the contact tracing are going to need. This is a really, really important distinction, because if you approach this as how do we trace everything, you will end up designing systems and business processes to perform a task that the nation is already establishing the systems and processes to do. Our role here as business owners, or as people running businesses, is to get the information to them as quickly as possible. The way that COVID is transmitted means that if we have effective and timely contact tracing, we can get ahead of it. If we know where the contacts have been and we can get that information fast, we can actually slow or prevent the transmission of that and from the clusters expanding and forming other clusters. So the real goal here, and this is the important things to remember, what we're trying to achieve is actually those kind of outcomes. Our role, what we can do to help with that, is to collect the information and make it easy to surface so that we find the right people at the right time. I want to highlight where this has an impact. For example, if you are tracing every contact that comes into a premise, but most of the contacts are casual, and only a few of them are actually what are technically called close contacts, you can actually overwhelm the contact tracing with a lot of information that actually slows down their ability to identify the people that they really do need to get in touch with. So when designing your approach to contact tracing, there's a number of things to think about. It's about the value of the information you're gathering. And then you start to get into, it's not just about the systems that you put in place, but the policies that you put in place as well. So you can actually design policies that restrict movement and focus the areas where contact tracing is required so that it's a far more manageable exercise. So there's a number of design features to this. It's not just about the systems, it's about the policies, it's about the zoning, a whole lot of things that you can do. And I'll get into how you make sure you cover that as we get into some of the details. So as you can appreciate, it can be a complicated topic. So one of the things that we did at Datacom to try and demystify this for our customers was to come up with a really simple framework. How can we boil this down and break the job down so it's easier to tackle? So the first thing we did was we came up with a framework. Well, this is actually one that I had used previously in high consequence health and safety as a way of describing the different responsibilities that you have and to break the issue down a little. Every business interacts with people, and it has a place where it operates. So all of the business activity in the middle has these three perspectives that you can look at. One is looking at it from a workplace perspective, the physical premise or the location of where work is actually being done. Or there's the workforce, your staff, and regardless of where they're working, how you manage them in terms of contact tracing systems or the other systems that you have in place. And then lastly, you have the public places where activity can happen as well. Each one of these has very, very different factors that determine how you might approach contact tracing or the systems and processes you put in place. For example, if you're looking at workplace, there may be customers and suppliers and contractors, as well as your workforce that need to be considered there. Then there are the physical aspects of contact tracing, such as the zoning or the policies or the signage that you might want to put in place there. From a workforce perspective, there is their activity tracking in terms of where they've been. Do we have access to the calendaring information to know who they've met with? Those kind of things. So by breaking this down to these different topics, you can start to see how you can leverage existing business as usual, as well as some of the response efforts that you're putting in place to actually make contact tracing quite manageable for a business so that you can support those investigations when they're needed. So that was just a really good way to start to look at to decompose the problem into manageable chunks. The next thing is to be aware that any sort of health and safety initiative that you take involves people. Not everyone does what they're told. Not everyone sticks to the rules or even is aware of them. And so there's a level of compliance with any of these activities that you have to accept. You'll also find there is a novelty value with the introduction of these things. There may be tremendous enthusiasm at the start, but then if it's a burden on people and they see no tangible benefit to them, then they will often wane off. You'll find them starting to take shortcuts. They wash their hands less. They forget to scan in as they arrive in the office. Those sorts of things can start to creep in over time with these kind of approaches. So focusing on the behavior aspect of this is really, really crucial. One technique that you can use, especially if you have a workplace and a workforce approach to collecting the information to support contact tracing, is that you can have partial compliance with both of those, but achieve a greater level of coverage. If you're half compliant in the workplace systems that you put in place to capture this information, but you have a completely different perspective and a way of capturing information about the workforce that gives you a different lens on this, the combination of the two will provide more coverage than compliance in any one of them does. So if you find yourself in a situation where the systems and the approach that you're taking is not giving you the coverage that you need, this is a technique that you can use to get more statistical coverage and do a better job. With all of these things, it's not going to be perfect. We have to stand these things up super fast. We have to respond to what's required out there, and we have to try and get the business operating. There are juggling decisions that you have to make all over the place. So this is just a way of combining things to do the best job you can with the least amount of resources in a really short period of time. That's all great. These are some conceptual ideas. That doesn't get you very close to actually doing stuff. So the next thing is to actually look at the approach that you take. One of the lessons that we learn coming from the software industry is Agile. Is a term that some of you may be familiar with if you've worked with software engineering at all. And the idea with Agile approaches to things is to not try and design everything up front and then build to the design. It's a realization that you're going to discover stuff along the way, and that what you do is you try and break it down into useful bits and build those and release those, learn from that, and then repeat it. So it's a very, very simple approach. And this is what we're looking at with some of the customers that we're working with from Datacom on contact tracing, is to actually get out there, and if there are things you're uncertain about, if you're not sure if it's going to work, do an experiment, try it out. You're going to learn more from that than you are from any sort of consultative collaboration, ideation kind of approach. If you need to move fast, the best way to do it is to actually get people involved, run an experiment, and learn from it. This learning approach is very, very fast and very effective in these kind of situations. Last point I'll probably make with this aspect to it is make sure you figure out who you include in these exercises. If you, for example, putting in place systems for for collecting information for contact tracing in a workplace, and your technician, your IT staff are designing the systems and coming up with great solutions, but they never talk to someone from facilities or someone who's an operations manager on site, chances are that the best intentions will still come up short of what is practical on the site. There is no substitute for getting the right people involved in the exercise. So very important with these kind of rapid approaches to standing things up is to make sure you include people from the start in the design stage or the defining stage. So that's just a really big ask, please, if you're looking at these things, is that you consider it from that perspective. Oh, that's great. So now we're here. So what do I do? What's the very first step? Building for a response to a crisis is a little bit different than adapting your business as usual. So we've come up with a 3-step process to just basically allow people to undertake a response plan for COVID-19 that does not require all of the ceremony that comes with business as usual decision making. That's really key. That's really key. The most important thing is to appreciate when something is business as usual, when you're adapting business as usual, and when you're doing something that is just in response to COVID-19. The way to move quickly on these things is to, rather than coming up with plans and strategies and resource allocations and all those kind of things that you might typically do in a planning phase, is to actually organize, activate, and then operate. There's just 3 simple steps that we'd encourage people to walk through. Organizing, like I said before, it's about getting the right people together. It's not just organizing is not just about people, but it's also identifying the systems and where you're going to have to design process and who's going to be thinking about those processes that you're going to need to put into operation. Assign ownership. Give people responsibilities for the response plan. Get them together and organize, schedule the meetings, get them together, even if you don't know what you're going to talk about. You're all starting with a blank piece of paper, but you get clever people in a room together with a mission and a bit of a flow to follow, and they'll work it out. You've got to trust people. When you trust people in these crisis moments, they absolutely rise to the occasion, and you will see the best of people at these times. So organize first. It is tempting once you're organized to say, hey, we've got it. Let's just go straight. Let's just turn it on. Let's just operate. I caution people that it is to think about how you turn this on. This is really important, because just simply saying, hey, you've now got this job does not equip that person. They need to walk in those shoes for a bit. As I mentioned before, no one's done this before in your business or out there. We actually have to allow people just that moment to actually get comfortable and confident before you start operating. You'll also find with the activation phase is that there is some staging of the establishing of communications around this. You want to equip those who are taking leadership responsibility for the response to be well informed before you inform the people they're looking after. One of the most frustrating things you can possibly do is to actually inform everyone at the same time. I mean, as the staff or the customers look to the people in leadership positions for more information, they are unprepared. It is very stressful for everyone. So just the staging of that. So it doesn't have to be much, might only be a few hours, but just equip your leadership to be able to respond to the people that they're looking after. And it can make a massive difference to the confidence that everyone has that the system is going to work. Lastly, is that when you do set up from an operational perspective, you want to be ensuring that there is ownership of the operation. It's not just a case of turning on the systems, putting up the signs, and hoping that everyone's going to comply. Is that there needs to be someone overseeing that as well as operating it, so that they've got someone to go to. For example, if you have an operations manager looking after some sort of premise and you've implemented this response plan, factor in some mechanism for them to monitor how it's going. It's not just the monitoring, is that you want to encourage good behavior, good participation, good compliance. Perhaps there are things in an operational perspective you can carry out to do that. For example, reward and recognition systems for those who are actually doing well, or assistance for those that are struggling to comply. Or perhaps you can gamify it. There's all sorts of things that you can do from an operational perspective to ensure that whatever you do in response to the contact tracing requirements actually operates effectively. It's not just simply about turning on the systems. So that's sort of our very simple framework, a bit of structure to understand how to break down the demands that we have on us, a strategy in terms of dealing with the compliance issues, an approach to standing this all up, and a process to follow to bring it to life. One of the things that we wanted to just cover off, this is all fantastic. This could be useful. Hopefully there's something interesting here for everyone. Doesn't mean a lot if you can't actually turn on systems. Nobody can build from scratch right now systems to support all of this, because we're talking about capturing information. To do that, you need some sort of systems to capture that. And we need them now. We don't need them in 6 months' time, so we can't start build projects. So what have we got now that can help us with that? And that's something that Datacom has actually spent a bit of time looking at, and that's where what led to today's webinar was the work that we've been doing around the different district health boards and universities around their solutioning. So this diagram probably just overlays the overall story. You'll see from this that we have our framework that we've discussed a little bit about, setting the scene. Then it's a case of right-sizing the types of solutions that you might look at. At the simplest layer is basically the signing in and signing out using QR codes or other sort of mechanisms to keep track of people visiting locations. And that can map into all sorts of other mobile self-tracing solutions. So that's the simplest first level that you can go to. In some situations where the workplace may demand a much higher level of movement tracking, or perhaps there are some really critical things to maintain, like observing social distancing. If social distancing becomes a problem in an area, you have just increased your contact tracing requirements. So it might be that as part of your zoning and other rules, you want to make sure you're enforcing those. And so there's some surveillance type systems that we have. There's digital that you can link in with digital signage, as well as security systems and tracking against hot zones. There's a number of things that we do at this level that are already available in the marketplace from other solutions and protective services and things like that. Then we get to the final layer where you actually have to be very granular. You really want to know where everyone is all the time. So for example, you have high risk environments. Let's say, for example, in a hospital where you have staff caring for COVID patients. In that situation, you have a much higher level of duty of care, a much more detailed level of movement tracking that you might want to do. So there are Bluetooth card type solutions where they're using beaconing technology, more advanced analytics around the surveillance, and a bunch of other deep tracing kind of solutions that are available. So so we've taken sort of a layered approach to this, saying you can start simple, do what you need to from a practical, fast rollout kind of solution, all the way through to something more critical. And it's a case of looking at your situation and figuring out what is the appropriate solution for your business, for the places where you work, and the people that you engage with. So that sort of lays out the very simple model that Datacom's taking in dealing with some of the larger campuses and organizations. What has been very interesting is that there's obviously a lot of concern that some people have with these kind of solutions. Is that first question is, well, what's it going to cost me? And also there is I want to be able to work with people on these kind of things. So there's a real understanding that this is not an opportunity for profiteering. This is something to support people so we can all get back to business. So for example, at that first, I'll just use one example, which is at the first layer, Salesforce has made their solution for implementing QR codes available free for 3 months. Datacom's also been able to negotiate a pretty good deal with them so that the ongoing licensing is just for the administrators of the system rather than for all of the interaction with it. So we've done what we can to make that solution fast and viable and cost effective. We tried to frame this up in a way that it's right-sized and that it's a pragmatic solution. And then we can go into the other ones as well, where we're very conscious that some of these solutions may be expensive for people. But if the value is there because of the situation, we are also talking with customers about, well, could this be something that you fold into your business as usual, as opposed to it just being for a response? Some of the stuff could be really, really useful. Some behaviors out of this could be really useful to actually improve how you care for customers, how you care for staff on an ongoing basis. And that can also have an effect that this could be a time to experiment with this to see if it's a good fit as business as usual. So I have no idea how the timing of that worked out, Adam, but I have raced through the content that I prepared, and I'm available for questions. Oh, one thing I have done is I've just put a link to, there's a white paper that we put out on this, and so there's a lengthy link at the bottom. But if you just go to datacom.co.nz, go to the blog and search for contact tracing, you'll find this blog through that mechanism as well. Or you can get to it through this link. So with that, I'll hand back to Adam.
Fantastic. Roger, if you could copy that link and put it in the chat box, that would be quite helpful. And I know that Sean will send it out to all the participants and will be available to everybody else.
Okay,
afterwards.
fantastic.
Okay, so if I just go through some of the questions that we've had come through. How long do you anticipate contact tracing to continue? Will this be through alert level 1?
So part of what I did was this. I had a look at some of the epidemiology for COVID-19, because it's more a case of how is COVID going to behave and what are we up for, rather than where the contact tracing goes. While we are still running at alert levels, yes, I can see contact tracing still being required. While we're on alert, that means that COVID is still a threat to the population. So we have to use mechanisms to mitigate that. What you might find is that at level 1 is that the rules under which we operate will be adapted. So contact tracing may become, may be operating under different rules, or the requirements or the level of detail that we have to capture may change. What you might find is at level 1 is that if there is a second wave or a third or a fourth wave, is that the speed with which we drop to level 2 or 3 or 4 will be very rapid. I would expect that. So it's not a case of turning these things off, but you might need to keep them warm, but not hot, if that helps.
Yeah, Roger, you mentioned about this potentially becoming best practice. Is that what you're recommending to people, that actually the continuation of this moving forward is something that you'd be recommending?
So I'm going to give you a yes and no to that. Sorry, so it depends on your business requirement. During these times of crisis, because this is what we're preparing for, you introduce a whole lot of practices that make sense right now. And they can feel good because especially if you're in a leadership perspective from a business, because you suddenly have all this extra information and insight into what's happening in your business, and there's a desire to keep it. That may not fit well with the culture. You have to be very sensitive to how intrusive this is into people's sense of privacy and belonging and being trusted. When you start tracing, collecting information about the movement of people, there is some factors around trust and the relationship that you have between people. So it's more from a cultural perspective. I'd be really cautious about how much you leverage this back into business as usual. In some situations where health and safety, let's say health and safety is an area where a lot of people could always do better. If this is coming from a place of caring and there are some things that have enhanced your health and safety practices that people would welcome, or it's behavior you want to encourage in your culture, then yeah, by all means, leverage it. But just be very careful when you're talking specifically about contact tracing.
So just pick up on that data protection.
Yep.
How and what should people be aware of what they can do and what they can't do?
So you run into the key one here is that because this is personal information and you are capturing it, you do have a duty of care around information. You cannot avoid that. And what I would recommend, and this is why we were talking about using existing systems and solutions. One of the practical conversations I've been having with people is that you use information that you already have. Because then you already have good data protection practices, hopefully, in place for your business as usual. And then you supplement that with the contact tracing. The contact tracing is something you do need to talk to someone who is expert in this stuff. Do not just, there is a temptation just to do it yourself. one of the issues that you have is, in order to inform contact tracing, you have to be able to find people to support the investigation. The investigators need to actually be able to reach out and contact people that have been, they need to then, I'm tripping at too many words, contact. They need to actually speak to the people who have been in contact. And so for that, they need those details. And the question is, what is the responsibility of businesses to capture that information? That, I think, everyone is still working out. And you'll see that a lot of back and forth, especially around retail, as to what is the level of responsibility that retailers have for capturing information, personal contact information about people entering the stores. Those are still being worked out. So there is no clean answer to that. All you can say is show duty of care for the data that you do capture and the access that you provide to it. That's just good hygiene. Yeah, and leverage existing systems, because anything you build from scratch is gonna create all these sorts of considerations which will slow down your ability to bring a system to life. Yeah.
So one of the things that I think's been quite prevalent is and you mentioned about retail. So a number of people that are probably watching this are from a retail space, might not necessarily have the electronic systems in place. A number of them are probably just using pen and paper. Is that enough? If you recommend a technology solution, where can people go and find, and how do they go about putting and implementing that within their businesses? So
this will be for smaller businesses. It's the pen and paper approach is it has data protection issues as well. It's there for everyone to see, basically. So the solutions, and it does come down to the suppliers, the IT providers in the marketplace. They are the ones, there's a huge amount of work being done to bring these solutions quickly to market. So if you are a retailer and you're using point of sale solutions, you have mechanisms there for tracking things. You have customer loyalty schemes that you're running. There are all of those kind of aspects to it. The other one too is that you actually, if you have a volume of activity, is that you actually try to do things that resolve that in a different way, where you avoid the need for contact tracing. You know, for example, we were all lining up outside shops for a while. If the situation is that you're unable to do that contact tracing for them coming on premises, that you do operate some of the model where you find other ways of doing business. I know that's a harsh way of looking at it, but yeah, if you cannot find solutions to this by engaging in business activity without this contact tracing, you are potentially creating some really, really big problems down the track for us if we get another wave. You know, there was people gathered in a bar in Matamata at the start of all of this for St. Patrick's Day for some drinks. That was enough to kick off a whole cluster there. Mm-hmm. So if this is not over. All we've done is we have eliminated it, or essentially eliminated it from our population. We are still susceptible to COVID as a population. It is still in the world. It can still arrive. There is likely to be an environment where we have to be ready to protect ourselves against it at any time. So this is, although contact tracing might be a burden, getting it there and figuring out how to get it lean is really important. But there is a whole tech industry there that is working on this and coming up with solutions. Talk to them. Yeah.
So where would you be recommending that people should be going to talk to them? Should it be local IT providers? Should it be the trade associations? Where would you be recommending that people should be going to find potential solutions?
Well, hopefully everyone is working with someone right now. Start with your supplier. There is a case of like I said, just getting on with it. You know, if you have people that help you with your IT, talk to them. One of the key messages in the paper that we published, and it's the last point that we make, is we're all in this together, and we've all got to start sharing and talking And there is no, hey, follow this pathway and you'll get to an answer. It is a case of working your networks. This is the organizing part of it. Start with the people that you know, and if they don't have an answer, ask them who they recommend to talk to, and just network out from your starting place. And also pay attention to what's being publicized out there. There is plenty of information coming out about this stuff.
Fantastic. Sean, just coming to you, I think maybe there's a point that VTT maybe need to just understand in the local marketplace who is providing some of those services and then share it with the community. Just interested from your perspective, how and what are VTT doing as an organization from regards to kind of contact tracing? How and what have you been doing?
Yeah, so touching on a couple of points that Roger's made today, so it's my second day in the office from right at the start there. I haven't been in this office, so it was my induction on Monday, and before any kind of induction or anything happened, I was Lucy, who one of the general managers here. So they were utilising the leadership in here and just made it really clear that contact tracing and the physical distancing is really important. So that was the first things first. So establish that. And then we also, the contact tracing is been established here. So we're utilising already existing systems. So when you come to the door, you need to sign in, and then every time you're signing in, signing out. That's the same with all employees and any visitors.
Thank you. Roger, you mentioned this aspect about communication and behaviour. How do we continue? What would be your recommendations for kind of that human behaviour aspect of communication, both verbal and non-verbal? In your experience, what would you be recommending that companies and organisations should be doing?
There is what I've seen is two approaches that complement each other. So one is that the people in top leadership positions need to be visible. It makes a massive difference when someone in a leadership position for an organisation or a community actually stands up and says, "Hey, listen, we've got to take this seriously. This is important. It's for us, and this is what we need to do, and we're all in this together, and we need to support each other." When they say things like that, when they keep that profile and keep that communication going, it makes a massive difference to compliance. To complement that, you also let's call it a push and pull kind of strategy. They need to be speaking to the community to create a desire out there to comply and to feel this behavior. Then you do the push side of it, which is actually to equip the leaders in the field, the people who are influencing the field or interacting with the community or the staff, to actually follow up with something. It's a very simple push-pull kind of approach, which can reinforce each other. If you do one without the other, then what happens is you are pushing when there's no pulling, or you're pulling when there's no one there to help you. And so, yeah, it's really good to have a combination of those. One tip in terms of structuring communications, which I have found useful in previous crises, is to leverage this concept of alerts. What does, if my business is operating at alert level 2, what does that mean? And then it's because when you do that, it says this is what's important right now. That might change. We might go to alert level 3 as a business, and what does that mean for our business? And then we might go to level 1. What does that mean? If you have that kind of structure, like we've seen for our nation, it gives people a lot of peace of mind because they understand what the priorities are right now. They accept that it can change, and if it does change, there's some comfort that the leadership is going to be there to implement the right policies for that changing circumstance, and that there's a way of communicating it and keeping it succinct.
That suggestion about the alert level system, are you suggesting that should be internal or for external stakeholders as well?
everyone. If for example, Datacom has its own alert levels that it's operating to. It helps with customer expectations. It helps with staff understanding how to operate. You can declare an alert level, and then what does that mean for stakeholders that you're engaging with? It's a very effective method because it requires you to distill down to the essential points what it means right now. And it also gives some good structure for those in leadership positions that they're talking and demonstrating that they've got this, to show that they've thought it through, they've crushed it down to what's essential, and they're able to answer those questions. Just on the side, you'll see at the moment, most businesses are scrambling as they talk to each other, trying to reassure each other that we're okay and we're still able to operate. And there's an enormous amount of comms between businesses right now to reassure each other on those points.
Yeah, I think for me during this period, clarity creates confidence. So the
Yep.
clearer that you can be, have that clarity internal and consistently be reinforcing the message is quite clear. Question that's come through: are businesses allowed to use contact tracing details to form a database going forward?
So for now, you're stepping into I'm going to qualify this. I am not here to provide legal advice. Anything you do at your own risk. So that's just a precursor to what I'm about to say. Privacy, for those of you who are familiar with privacy rules, if you have collected information for a purpose, personal information, and then use it for another purpose, you are running some risks in terms of misleading people. So the important thing here is that if you are going to collect information with the intent of using it for other purposes, make sure that the people that you're collecting information from are aware of that. Now, you might do that at the time, or you might follow up later. If you've collected all this great information about people coming into your premise or doing business with, or wanting to do business with you, and you want to leverage that, reach out to them, ask them if you can. That's just your standard business practices.
Okay. Final question for me, Roger. What's the one piece of advice that you would recommend to people that they do, and one thing that they shouldn't do during this period?
Well, you caught me unaware. I wasn't ready for that one. Okay. The one piece is just that appreciation of the difference between business as usual and a response plan. Is that if you understand the actions that you're taking and the decisions you're making as to whether they are adapting your business as usual or whether this is something in response. If you nail that idea in every decision that you're making, it becomes really clear for everyone else how to handle it. The word response is really, really important here. Keep that top of mind. In terms of things not to do, the biggest handbrake specifically around contact tracing is to over-engineer the decision-making. Is that, yes, there are all of these concerns, like a number of them been raised today with data protection and all those kind of things, is to not try and design a perfect system to answer everything. If you are going for that conservative, we've got to design everything out, you will not achieve the outcome in a time frame that could be useful. We could be caught in a situation where you're still trying to design something and we have an outbreak and they need it. And you're also potentially preventing your business opening up because it's just such a slow process. It's a really, really hard juggling act we've got right now, getting this right. Give yourself a break, allow yourself to make a few mistakes, include everybody, and learn fast. That's what we all have to do.
Fantastic. Roger, thank you very much for your input. Sean, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Adam, for helping facilitate, and thanks again, Roger. That was really insightful. If any of you out there in the audience need some extra support on contact tracing, please feel free to get in touch with us and we can link you in with any IT enterprises that we've got out there. And I can also share the report that Roger has made on contact tracing. I'll be sending out an email which will have the recording on this as well. And I'll also have the invitation for the next webinar, which is going to be on Thursday, the 21st of May at 11:30. We're going to be joined by Sian Wingate. She's going to focus on tradies this time. So we're going to be looking at how you can target your terms to thrive beyond COVID-19. Thanks again for joining and have a lovely day.